the differentiation really comes from the brand, your organization, your story, and what makes you special and why people should care about you. The donation, everybody knows that you can donate to a charity or a nonprofit. They know they could get a tax receipt for, I don't know, maybe 100%, maybe it's 80%, whatever it happens to be. Chances are people are donating to you, not specifically because they could get a donation or a tax receipt, but they're donating because they care, right? And there's that emotional connection. So it's really about, in my opinion, and what we talk with our clients about is, what is it that sets you apart? What is it that makes you you? And how can we create that story, and how can we visually tell that story through the website to get people to give a darn about your organization?
Are you looking for ways to shorten your marketing learning curve and help your organization survive and thrive? Welcome to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast, a show for purpose-focused leaders who want to use marketing techniques to fuel their organization's growth. If you're a returning listener and you haven't subscribed already, we'd love to have you. Also, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now here's your host, author and marketing specialist, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here. Welcome to Relish This. My guest today is David Pisarek, and he is the founder of Wow Digital. And he also likes to call himself the chief digital aficionado there at Wow Digital. And I am just thrilled to death to be able to have a conversation with someone as knowledgeable in marketing, and with such experience in both the nonprofit and digital space as David. Our conversation today was wide ranging. We talked a lot about differentiation, storytelling, etc. And I think that you are going to get a ton out of our conversation. It's so much fun to be able to talk with industry leaders and experts on a weekly basis. And my conversation with David this week was one for the books. So I hope you have a good time listening to the show. Here we go. Hello, David. How are you?
How are you doing, Stu?
I am doing really well. Where are you joining me today from?
I am in Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Toronto. One of my good friends lives in that area, Aaron Rickson. He's a copywriter. I don't know if you know Aaron or not, but you should if you.
I do. He's
Yeah.
about an hour drive away from me.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the town, and it's hard to pronounce. He moved actually.
Oh,
He's
okay.
anyway. He's he and I go way back, and he's just a really great dude. We stay in touch and get to see each other very infrequently. So it's cool to get to know someone else who knows Aaron.
He's a great guy.
I
Can't speak
agree.
highly enough of him.
Yeah. So Toronto, have you been in the Toronto area your entire career, or is that a new place for you? How long have you been there?
Since the day I was born.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Native Torontoan. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So you are the founder of Wow Digital, and I am so excited to hear about what you do and how you do it and all the great things that you bring to the table for people in the nonprofit space. How did Wow Digital get started?
Great story there. So I've been doing web since like the early 90s, really just messing around on my computer. Went to school, graduated, and in 2000, I started working full-time in nonprofits, managing their web properties, intranet, digital signage systems, interactive kiosks, their website, like I mentioned. And then there were some cuts that happened. It happens, right? With any organization that gets government funding. And as I was looking for work, I just ramped up my freelance. So from 2000 to 2016, I worked in nonprofits. And then in 2016, mid 2016, I started ramping up my freelance and turned it into Wow Digital within a few months. So it's been about 6 years now.
Oh, that's great. What kind of nonprofits did you work with?
I worked in post-secondary education, so college and universities, and healthcare.
Nice. What were some of the things that that got you excited about nonprofit work in the first place?
It really comes down to, I guess, my upbringing. So, in terms of my youth, I was involved in youth groups growing up, and there was always this work we needed to do, and effort in terms of giving back to the community and volunteer
Hmm.
service and stuff like that. So it's really part of, I guess, who I am in my core moral belief and compass. And yeah, it's just, nonprofit doesn't mean no profit. There's organizations out there, they need help, they need
Hmm.
marketing, they need expertise. And because I worked in nonprofits, I've been on that side of producing RFPs and the painful processes that come with that. I've been on that side in terms of working with vendors and the painful processes that come with that, and the quality assurance that needs to happen with all of that. And one of the things that I swore when I started Wow Digital is that we are going to be different. We are going to help and be friendly and not be adversarial and deliver extreme value for our clients.
Well, that's certainly a much needed, much needed in this space. I think that there are just a ton of people out there who don't come at it from that same perspective, and so it's really cool to hear how your company has been able to kind of carve that out and create a really great opportunity for nonprofits. Do you just work with Canadian nonprofits, or you work with organizations down here in the States as well?
So just by the my connections, right? So the people that I've worked with, when I started Wow Digital, I reached out to my network and said, "Hey, I'm looking for work. I'm looking for projects. Is there anybody out there that in my network that needs some help?" And my network is Canadian because this is where I've been. So
Right.
I would say my primary market is in Canada, but we're borderless, right? You can work
Yep.
anywhere. If COVID has taught us anything, is that it doesn't matter where you are, you can still work for anybody anywhere. So if you're a 501(c) or you're starting and thinking about starting up a nonprofit, I'd be happy to work with anybody in the US, in the UK, Australia, Germany, like anywhere that you're looking for.
Nice. What's Wow's specialty in terms of the digital marketing work that you do? What's your bread and butter?
Our main service offering is websites. So if you need a new website or you need a site because you're a new organization, we'll work with that, as well as branding. So you have an organization, your logo feels like it's stuck in the 1960s or the 1970s. We'll work with you to refresh it, revise it, produce a brand guide, all of that, and pull that through right through the web.
Nice. Is there a particular platform that you are that you specialize in, or are you fairly agnostic when it comes to site construction?
We build, I would say 99% of what we do is on WordPress.
Okay. It's very similar to my organization called Relish Studio. We moved to WordPress quite a few years ago now. As soon as it kind of caught up, it started out as that more of a blogging type platform, and at one point it wasn't very easy to kind of shove around. And then once it kind of evolved and matured, we found it's just a great mix of functionality and ease of use for most of our clients. And so I think it's a pretty solid platform on which most nonprofits or many for profits can build a really strong base for their outreach and gathering support and all of those good things.
100%. Myself, I've been building and designing and developing with WordPress since 2005. So,
Hmm.
we're going on about, about 17 years. I've built websites in WordPress that are over 8,000 pages, and I've built them as
Hmm.
small as, one or two pages for like a couple landing pages, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's really robust. Anything that you want to build in the platform, I would say most likely somebody's already gone and done that. So there's free plugins, paid plugins that you can get. There's obviously some caveats with that. You want to make sure that there's support behind it and it was recently
Hmm.
updated. So in terms of any holes or vulnerabilities, those are all dealt with. But any kind of functionality you want likely already exists, and it's just a matter of going, okay, here's what we need to make this happen. For me, because I've been running the agency for about 6 years now, we've developed our standard, like our SOPs, or standard operating procedures, in terms of what we build, the plugins we use, and we have a very
Hmm.
reliable platform for that. As well, we also do the hosting side. So it's one thing to have a
Okay.
website, it's another to have it on a web host that is safe, fast, and secure.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've also found that there are certain things that one can do to optimize their hosting to work more effectively with the platform itself, and other little tricks that you can add to the hosting part of the equation to make sure that things run smoothly, and that there are backups and all of that great stuff. So that's great to hear that you're providing that kind of full package for people.
We want to make it as easy as possible for our clients to succeed in the digital era.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the things that you see nonprofits missing when they're looking for both a hosting solution and perhaps their website solution? What are some of the pitfalls that people should look out for that you've noticed in your experience?
I think there's a fine line between cheap and value, right? So there are web hosting providers out there. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to badmouth anybody, but maybe $3 or $4 a month will get you website hosting.
Hmm.
But for the most part, at that point, you're on a shared server. You're dealing with thousands of other websites that are in that same environment, and for some, it'll be totally fine. But as soon as you want to start growing your site, as soon as you want to start driving more traffic to your website, it's going to slow down. This has been our experience, anyways. It's likely going to slow down, and you're going to end up with a site that's hard or painful for you to go in and manage and update and edit. Some of the other issues that come up are, if a site on that shared server is hacked, even if it's not yours, there's potential that it might affect yours. So it all depends on the server environment and how they've segregated and separated and created these boundaries between the sites and the servers and the technology on the back end. So it's something to be
Yeah.
careful of. You want to make sure that you've got frequent backups of your site to kind of like counteract that.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually liken inexpensive hosting to like living in an apartment versus living in your own house. And when you're in an apartment and the neighbor sets his apartment or her apartment on fire, it tends to affect you a lot, a lot worse than when your next door neighbor does that. And that's kind of what can happen with extreme shared hosting, is you can get some bad apples that really do uh, create problems for everybody else in that space.
Yeah, it's a serious concern. There's a very large organization that's a client of ours, and we only have done their annual reports, which are on their server,
Hmm.
and their web hosting company said, "Oh, there's a problem with this. It got infected." And I have a number of, I guess, WordPress plugins installed in there. So we've got WordFence and Malwarebytes and like a bunch of stuff on that back end to kind of secure and protect. And I was like, "There's no way this came from ours." Turns out it came from a third party site because they're on a shared server, and my client didn't know about that.
Right.
This is real. This does actually really legitimately happen. And what we ended up doing is moving those annual reports off and onto our server.
Okay. Interesting. Well, it sounds like at least you had a way to get a workaround there for sure. What what are some of the things that you're seeing in the space, particularly as kind of through the nonprofit lens, that is getting you excited about nonprofit marketing these days?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I see with the clients that we work with is they don't really have any standard processes in place.
Hmm.
They have fragmented teams. They have systems that they don't even have access to, and really just organizing that for them and bringing it all together and setting them up for success from that perspective in terms of what their website is. But in terms of, I guess, nonprofits in general, there's some interesting things kind of on the horizon. Nonprofits tend to kind of lag behind education, and education kind of lags behind industry, right?
Hmm.
So we're nonprofits are probably about 5 to 6 years behind where the trends are for the most part. But there's a lot of interesting things happening around cryptocurrency.
Hmm.
Um, the markets are super volatile, but there's a lot of chatter in the nonprofit world about accepting crypto or NFTs and things like that for fundraising or donations.
So nonprofits, you think should at least have that as a top of mind opportunity, um, as a different payment structure, than just accepting credit cards and cash donations.
I think it's certainly worth investigating. There's a certain level of risk tolerance that you would need, but any smart organization is taking funds and investing them in some way, shape, or form. They shouldn't just be
Mhm.
sitting dormant as cash in your bank account.
Right.
So I think it's just another form of potential investment, and it's worth looking into. As an organization, you can look into creating NFTs and selling
Hmm.
them. So it's a non-fungible token. You've probably heard a lot of stuff in the media about the what is it? Oh, there's a guy. There's a kid. I think he's 13 or 14 years old, and he made something called what is it? Something about whales, and he has like
Okay.
all pictures of whales, and he's selling them, and he's made millions of dollars. This like pre-teen, early teen
Huh.
through NFTs. And if you can, as an organization, think about like if you work with elderly people, maybe you can bring in digital medium into it. And they can produce some of their artwork, and you can maybe sell it that way. And I think there's some interesting things happening in that space, but like I said at the start, it's a very volatile
Sure.
environment. The Bitcoin and Ether, and they just go up and down on an minute by minute basis. So um, I think it's worth investigating for your organization if you're listening to this, at least taking a look at it.
Yeah, it seems like it could be part of a differentiation of revenue opportunity, where like people who invest in their retirement, you put a certain amount in more risky than less risky, and just have a more of a diverse portfolio, for so to speak. I could see how crypto for nonprofits could be a huge win. Just being aware of the volatility of that, I think, would be the one piece that would be worth noting for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even if you accepted crypto and then you sold it and converted it to cash right away, it's one more way that somebody can make donations to you.
So, are there any other trends in the nonprofit marketing space that you have seen people take advantage of? I mean, you mentioned that nonprofits tend to lag, 6 years or so behind kind of industry. What are some of the things that you think, if there were one or two things that nonprofits should keep on their radar to try and get ahead of those trends a little bit? What are some of the things that you've seen that you think people should be paying attention to outside of revenue streams, but maybe more in the actual marketing space?
I think the first one would be focus on your content, right? Every organization wants to drive more traffic into their website because it's all right. Before I get into that, let me just take a second and just say you need to think of your website as a member of your team, right? It's not just a
Mm-hmm.
marketing brochure that's sitting there. So, having said that, people want to drive traffic to their websites because that's where they have all their information. It's essentially free once it's up and running. Yeah, you have maintenance costs and this and that and whatever, but you're not paying a full-time employee to sit there talking to everybody that comes, right? So, having up-to-date information on your website, easy to find contact information, but most importantly is content. Creating, even if it's 5 to 600 words once a week as a blog post, for example, or latest news or what's happening, whatever you want to call it, that is going to drive more traffic into your website. Um, by doing that, you're taking advantage of search engine optimization, so SEO. You want to make sure that you have analytics installed on your website so that you can see, what are the keywords and things that people are looking for that are driving traffic into your site. And you can start producing more content around that topic, right? So if you think of it as a word cloud, right? If the website article that you're posting is about I don't know why it's important to take care of seniors in Toledo, right? For
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
um, if that drives a lot of traffic, you'll see that in your analytics, and then you can start thinking in terms of like a word cloud. Like, what are some other topics around this idea that we can produce that will drive even more traffic in and more traffic in and more traffic in? And by driving that traffic in, you can place call to actions on those pages that are relevant to the content, and by doing that, it'll ultimately lead to more donations for your organization, more subscribers to your email list so you can market to them, and more potentially volunteers that are willing to help with your cause.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've seen is how if you think about the blog post as kind of a um, mid-sized piece of content, and most people think about how can I take a blog post and repurpose it a number of different ways, so chop it up into little mini social posts or things of that nature. So certainly that one piece of content can inform down, but when you have a group of content that has a similar theme or kind of combined can tell a story, those blog posts can start to be the anchor for an upward trend as well. So for example, the book that I wrote a couple of years ago, actually with Aaron Rickson, who we talked about earlier in our podcast, started as 4 blog posts that were very popular. And I said, well, what we should do is maybe just package these together into a small little ebook, and that way, it could be, a standalone kind of larger giveaway item that we could probably use in exchange for an email address. And then once that idea kind of took root, we expanded it into about a 50-page book. And so when you think about creating that content all around that one central key term, now another thing we're doing is creating hub pages around that material. So you have kind of a content rich page that then links out to a bunch of other similar content or associated content within your site, and you have what we call a hub page that the search engines right now at least seem to really like to send traffic to.
Yeah, and I'm really glad right at the beginning when you were just talking right now, you mentioned, creating a story, right? And it's really
Mm-hmm.
that storytelling piece that will help create an emotional connection between you and your audience. And that emotional connection is what's going to get people to care about what your organization does. Because there's if whatever you're doing isn't unique, right? There's another organization somewhere else, maybe they're local, maybe they're in another country, maybe they're across the country, but there are other organizations doing the same work that you're doing for the same people that you're working on it for, and creating that emotional connection is going to get them to care about you versus another organization.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of, in the for-profit space, there's a lot of talk about funnels, and you have, you put a bunch of people in the top and they kind of fall out the bottom, and some of those people become customers, and it feels very frictionless in terms of, certainly you have drop off at every stage of that engagement, but the idea around it is that it's kind of like numbers in, numbers out game. And in the nonprofit space, we like to talk about how much friction there is. Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking, how am I going to give away some of my money or some of my time today? And so we liken the stakeholder journey in the nonprofit space is more of a mountain, that there's friction all along this journey up this mountain. And, there are a lot of people that come in at the bottom and they get a little bit of the way up and then say, no, this isn't for me, and go the other direction. But you have to combat that friction all along that journey. And then in fact, the hook is the like the positivity hook actually happens before people make that kind of donation decision. And so you have to keep people just really excited about what you're doing kind of throughout that process. Um, And yeah, storytelling is just part of that game to make sure that you reduce that friction as much as possible, because what you're having to do is basically combat not only why should they choose you versus some other nonprofit, but there's also the or doing nothing at all. So there's kind of an extra added challenge that nonprofits face in that conversion.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I see time and time again, even from nonprofits that are, in the $1 billion of fundraising a year, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, is they'll only reach out when it's donation time, when it's donation season. So maybe,
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of the year, hey, get your donations in for your tax receipt, right? And that is one of the biggest faux pas that I could possibly tell everybody to stay away from. You want to tell the story. You want to be consistent with the story. You want to have the same kind of tone and messaging through everything. So you're, consistent and have that tied to your brand. But more importantly than that is staying in touch with your audience over time, not just when it's time for your campaign that you want to run, right? And part of that storytelling should be, how are donor funds being spent? What is it going towards? And create those like warm and fuzzy kind of stories that will make your cause more compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we hear all the time from nonprofits is that they don't want to bother their donors, and I think that if we could recommend just a mindset shift on that if you're bringing value and bringing more value than your competitor, or which is, there's certainly competitors in the nonprofit space, but every step of the way, just attempting to to enrich people's lives through the information that you're sharing, you don't have to ask for donations every single interaction or every single engagement, but it makes it makes it even more. You can actually ask more often when you're providing material of value on a consistent basis. So, if you only reach out to your stakeholders 4 times a year, and each of those times is an ask, then they're probably going to get a little tired of you reaching out to them. But if you reach out to them once a month, for example, or even more frequently, if you have good stories to tell, you can mix those asks in on a more frequent basis and really improve your chances of getting people to take action.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a book here. I just went to grab it. I've got it on the desk here beside me, by Ian Harris, called Hooked on You. And the subtitle here is The Genius Way to Make Anybody Read Anything. And the way you do that is by telling compelling stories. And if you're acting in a storytelling medium and format and creating those connections, then you make your message more palatable, I guess is the word, right? So, you know,
Yeah.
don't ask for a donation every single time. Yeah, maybe in your email template you've got like a donate button, right? But
Mm-hmm.
here's how funding last quarter, this is what we spent it on. Here's the story about, this child that we helped with X, Y, and Z. Or if your organization buys, let's say, accessibility vans for families that
Mm-hmm.
can't afford them, right? Feature the family, tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, the big donors that helped make that come through, right? And you can use that to drive the importance of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We have done some work with kind of the story brand narrative. I don't know if you're familiar with story brand and Donald Miller's kind of framework around storytelling.
Yep.
But one of the things that he recommends is trying to change the narrative so that the organization isn't the hero of the story, that you're basically your donors or your volunteers or even the beneficiaries of your services become kind of the hero of the story, and the organization is there as kind of the catalyst for that, and the um, they become the kind of the guide in that story. And it's a little bit challenging for some nonprofits to not only wrap their arms around that, but figure out how to tell that story. Have you seen that told effectively in the work that you that you've done with some of your nonprofit partners?
Be honest, no. I haven't. There's a lot of my clients work with the public, and they bring in the kind of like community service type of space, and they talk about the great work they do in the communities they do, and the students that they help, for example, and it's really hard to kind of pull that line through. So one of the things, like, my agency doesn't really focus on the content side of stuff. We'll work with them.
Okay.
We'll get them in touch with like PR or media editorial or writers, that type of thing, if they want that kind of help. And we make suggestions to them like, hey, you're doing this kind of thing. Let's talk about that some more. Let's build a little bit of a campaign around that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that having at least that idea in play is it is a challenge. I mean, we see it as well. It's a little bit hard to kind of reframe that story in the nonprofit space, because the organization itself is doing such great work in terms of facilitating the help that people are bringing to the nonprofits. So it's certainly a challenge. I think that if people out there are writing for your organization, just keeping that in the back of your mind in terms of how can you reposition the organization itself as the guide of that journey, that will can reap some benefits for sure. What are some
100%.
of the things that you get pushback on from nonprofits in terms of your methodology, but that is an effective technique for creating improved conversions, for example?
So when we're working with our clients, we try our best to work with them, not for them. We want to
Hmm.
partner with them. We want to be essentially an extended part of their marketing, communications, IT realm of team, and we're there to help them. We don't want to be adversarial. We don't want to be combative. We don't want to cause any rifts or anything like that. So part of the initial onboarding is getting that buy-in from them, and getting them to really understand, hey, we're here to help you. We understand the problems that you've got, and we think that doing X, Y, and Z is what's really going to help you because of A, B, and C. And
Hmm.
we can do that because of our experience that we have in the nonprofit and charity space. So when we're meeting with our clients, we always talk about, what are their processes? How are their teams organized? And we try to get them to think outside of their organization. Ultimately, you need to think about things from your end user's perspective. So, who is it that's looking for information about your organization? Who is it that's coming, if they're like clients or patients or volunteers or families or caregivers or whoever that group is, and really defining those personas and creating avatars around that. So, we have something that
Hmm.
we call our victory program. And it's a series of discovery sessions, essentially, where we deep dive into the organization and who they are. We talk about the community and we build out avatars. We talk about strategy and tactics and what is the content that they're looking for. How are we going to get that to them? How are we going to drive traffic into the website? What are we going to do with your email list, right? Like some basic things like that. And then we put that all together and come up with a roadmap report that's really going to outline the way to get them successful in the digital space.
Yeah, it really does start with the person that you're trying to appeal to, and if you haven't done that avatar work, that persona work, it makes it a little bit challenging to build a program and a system that you have a high degree of confidence is going to resonate. So I certainly, I mean, we do a ton of strategy work over here as well, and persona development is a piece of that for sure. Do you see nonprofits on your end typically skipping that step and just kind of going with we're trying to appeal to everyone? Is that the what you see on your end?
Sometimes, and it's kind of an interesting conversation when that comes up, because I always come back and I'm like, all right, let's say it's an organization that's dealing with seniors, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so you're trying to appeal to everyone. So how about teenagers? Are you trying to appeal to them? Is like who is the main persona that you're trying to target, right? It's likely
Right.
not seniors, right? It's likely their children,
Hmm.
right? It's not their grandchildren. It's not
Right.
their friends. It's right. So there is not necessarily one persona that is always going to be the one that is your main who you're focusing on. There's always some like
Hmm.
secondary, tertiary ones, but ultimately there's one demographic, one psychographic, one geographic when you're putting that persona together in terms of who you should be targeting. And with regards to that, a lot of organizations want to publish their content on their website in the way their organization is organized, right? So you have like these silos of content on the website, and
Hmm.
that's not how people are surfing the web. That's not how people are going to be looking for it. If your um, department is called careers and volunteerism, for example, instead of
Hmm.
like human resources and volunteer services, for example, you need to think about how is it that people are going to be looking for, right? So having a section on your website that says get involved, that might be able to encapsulate it a little bit more differently than, um, you know, taking up more space in your navigation for careers and then volunteers.
Right. Right. So you subscribe to the idea that only the more important elements should be in the top nav, and the less important elements maybe move down to the footer. Is that accurate?
I think it's important to have a clear site mapping process that will really outline what the intent of the different parts of the website are for, right?
Hmm.
So, taking a look at your navigation that you've got on your website currently, taking a look at your analytics to go, okay, here are the popular pages on our site. Should we reorganize these, right? Should there be a programs area and a services area when you only have like maybe three or four of each? Maybe those should be
Hmm.
combined into like programs and services. And then it's one
Hmm.
place where they can discover other related services that you have to offer your organization. I don't think there's a necessarily a one size fits all.
Right.
We take an approach where we're very super collaborative with our clients that we work with, so that we can produce something that will resonate for the people that they're trying to target, and it ultimately comes back to those avatars and personas that you've developed. Who are they? What are they looking for? What is their their typical level of education? Are they tech savvy? Are they not tech savvy? Right? And basing it off of that, it'll really help drive those conversations about these other pieces for the website.
Yeah, absolutely. Do I mean, clearly the amount of lift that you get will depend upon what organization you've done the work for. But when you do that reorganization, do you typically see big gains in traffic? Is it drop offs? Is it both that you're improving when you make those changes? What's the key metric that you're trying to influence there?
APIs are really interesting when it comes to web because they're not all created equal, right?
Hmm.
So if you have a lot of copy on a web page, and maybe it's a little bit more scientific, let's say you're talking about research that your organization is doing, or a partnership that you've founded with another organization, something like that, where it might be a little bit harder to digest that content and the copy. Imagine like a wall of paragraphs of content, right? People aren't
Hmm.
used to reading walls of copy. They just want to skim really quickly. So, like in terms of best practices for content, anybody listening to this, think about like short paragraphs, maybe a couple sentences, bullet points, and bolding and highlighting in terms of titles for different types of content. That'll really help you get across information to the people that are browsing your website a little bit easier. But back to what you were asking is, building out your site in a way that makes it easy for people to navigate and find the information they're looking for is ideal. You might have there's something called bounce rate, right? So
Hmm.
that's somebody coming into a page and leaving without looking at any other content on your website. That could be, you know what? They went into Google and they searched for Stu's organization contact, right? And they click on your contact page and they find your phone number and they pick up the phone and call, right? There isn't necessarily a need for them to browse another page of your site.
Hmm.
So, that's not really necessarily a great metric to drive traffic for. There's time on page, which, like I was talking about before, if there's a lot of copy, chances are you're either going to have a short page time because people are just going to zone out and leave.
Hmm.
It, I don't subscribe to the Google Analytics as the be all and end all of tracking your metrics and your KPIs. I think what some good metrics are to measure is maybe email subscribers, donations, increase in donations to your organization, so like year over year. And one of the trends, just going back to your question, like super early on in the episode, is one of the other things that I'm really interested in is driving an increase in donations. So building
Hmm.
smart donation forms that know, okay, Stu, you've gone to David's organization and last year you donated $100, right? It knows who
Right.
you are and it'll recommend $110, right? Or $200 or $300 or other, for example. You'd be like, yeah, I think I donated about 100 last year. Sure, I'll do 110, right?
Right.
As opposed to 100, 100, 100, 100. And, if you can increase your donations by 5% year over year or 10% year over year, even on some of the smaller donations, let's say it's $50 and you have, $55, 75 and 100, right? Chances are you're going to increase your donations. And there's some interesting things kind of happening with some donation platforms around that space.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of donation system optimization. And one of the first questions I ask is, do you know your average donation through this type of a channel? Because what we want to make sure of is that we provide recommendations for donation sizes. That tends to help conversion, but we want to make the right recommendations where, obviously we want to anchor high to get people to be encouraged to look at that middle number, but we absolutely want that middle number to be larger than your average, so that you're effectively trying to drive that average up a little bit, and that's just one of those things that a lot of organizations struggle with, is figuring out what should those those pre-filled essentially donation values be, or those or easily selectable donation values. And then certainly we want to leave an open-ended opportunity. I have seen some donation forms that just had, let's say, 3 to 5 recommendations. I think 5 is too many, but they just had the recommendations, and it's like, well, you might have been leaving money on the table because that person may have been interested in giving you, $1,000 or 10 grand or something like that. And if you don't allow them the ability and the opportunity to fill in their own number, then there's potential missed opportunity as well. Have you
That
seen other donation form optimization tips that you'd like to share?
Keep it short. That's probably
Yep.
the biggest thing. I would say for that first, I've never made a donation. You've just got like a donate now button on your website. You want to keep it short. So like first name, email, phone, and their donation, and like take them through for their credit card processing and that type of thing. Getting their mailing address, make that like a down the road, right? So if you send
Yeah.
out another, right, you want to make it as streamlined as possible. You don't want to make it super cumbersome. If you have a ton of different departments at your nonprofit or charity and you want people to donate to like a specific cause, don't display all of your options at once. Make it a drop down. Like you want to visually
Yeah.
just make it super simple for
Yeah.
people, and they don't feel overwhelmed when they're looking at it. That would be probably the best advice I've got.
Yeah, I think removing any form fields that are unnecessary is key. If you don't have to collect the address to capture a credit card or to process a credit card, then I would say you're absolutely spot on. Just save that for later. And in fact, we have seen that phone is one of the things that people want to part with the least. And so if you don't have to collect a phone number, absolutely don't do that, and certainly don't make it mandatory. People, that's the one device that people have really continued to try to protect as much as possible.
And that's exactly it, right? Like how think about it from your own perspective, right? You're sitting at home and then you get a phone call about a donation you for an organization that you made a year and a half ago, and they're hitting you up trying to get another donation out of you. It's like, why are you calling me? I haven't heard anything from you, right?
Mm-hmm. What are some of the techniques or tips that you've used to work on differentiation? I mean, we talked early on about how you have to tell a story that explains why people should give to you as opposed to a different organization. We had an organization that we just did a survey for, and one of the things that we noticed was their differentiation on their donate button was that this is 100% tax deductible. And I pointed out that that's absolutely not a differentiator in their space, that we need to do a little bit better job of providing some information that that's going to help somebody make that decision of why them versus another organization. Are there techniques that you've used to try and help people get to that differentiator?
The differentiation really comes from the brand, your organization, your story, and what makes you special and why people should care about you. The donation, everybody knows that you can donate to a charity or a nonprofit. They know they could get a tax receipt for, I don't know, maybe 100%, maybe it's 80%, whatever it happens to be. Chances are people are donating to you not specifically because they could get a donation or a tax receipt, but they're donating because they care, right? And there's that emotional connection. So it's really about, in my opinion, and what we talk with our clients about is, what is it that sets you apart? What is it that makes you you? And how can we create that story, and how can we visually tell that story through the website to get people to give a darn about your organization?
Right. Are there ways that you and your team help tease that out? I know you mentioned that you don't really do content, but it sounds like you do a lot of strategy and helping people with processes. Do you have a process for walking a client through that type of exercise?
One of the things that we do in the Victory program when we're talking about their organization and the people that work there, so really like the first session that we conduct with them, we talk about, why do they care about the work? Why do they love working there? What is it that
Mm-hmm.
they're doing day to day that gives them value, that gives them purpose, that makes them care to come back the next day, right? And really kind of getting those details and compiling that will help figure out and solve, the Rubik's cube of their story, to
Mm-hmm.
what is it that really creates that message, right? Talking to the volunteers, getting together with a beta testers group, for example, or like a web steering committee volunteer group of people who volunteer or have made donations to the organization. Why did you donate, $10,000 to this organization? What made you care about this? Usually it comes down to, okay, they know if it's a health related thing, they know somebody that has been affected by lung cancer, for example. And so they care about the cause because of that. And really, being able to tell the story that way through the website comes through in the visuals, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
images that you've got on the website, videos that you can produce, testimonials, those type of things, and collateral that you can include in the website, that you can include in social media, and really building a bit of not just a brand guide, but the brand story and
Mm-hmm.
the related collateral around that. So um, like the mood board, essentially, of
Right.
here's how everything should look and feel as you go out in the world and you tell people about the work that you do.
Yeah, I think that's a great process, for sure, to at least keep people um, thinking about that and starting with those either client or supporter interviews, interviewing your team. You can get a lot of really great information just from doing some interviews. One of the things that we've found, and particularly in the for-profit space, because those tend to be the businesses that get reviewed, but you can get a lot of information from just looking at reviews, either for your own organization or competitor organizations, just to get a feel for what were some of the motivations or motivators that drove people to support that organization.
100%, right? You can leverage influencer marketing, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? In terms of social media and driving more attention to your organization. If there's somebody related to somebody who's got like a cousin twice removed, right? There's ways around finding brand ambassadors to help you kind of tell that story. Even if it's just volunteers, famous, not famous, doesn't really matter, right? Getting
Right.
people out there talking about the work you're doing, letting employees know, hey, it's okay during the day to spend a few minutes on social talking about, not necessarily talking about your organization, but maybe going in and liking a post or sharing a post
Mm-hmm.
and doing things like
Mm-hmm.
that, and really having in the business world, the company culture, right?
Yeah.
The organizational culture that, hey, it's okay, everything that you're doing, we're all here as a team, we're all here working together for the same cause and purpose to help X, Y, and Z, to solve X, Y, and Z, right? And it's really a matter of creating that like kind of family bond and making people know, okay, we need to share this stuff because we want to do this next year, right? We worked with an organization that's looking at setting up um, another campus, another facility for them. And we walked through like a quick budget conversation. It's like, all right, they have a gala they run every year. They get about $250 to $300,000 every year through that gala, but they want to open up this new space. So what do they need to do? They need to raise X amount of money. And then I went into a conversation with them. I'm like, all right, but what about buying tables and chairs? Okay, they work with children, right? So you need
Right.
art supplies, you need staffing, you need this, right? And really quickly it jumped to, oh, if we want to do that in 3 years' time, we need to raise 750,000 every year, right? And
Right.
kind of having those high level strategic conversations about what are their goals and aspirations and how can we help them get there. I mean, that was way off base from from the work that we typically do. um,
Right.
it's part of that strategy that we bring to the table with
Yeah.
the clients we meet.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to kind of expand marketing into just business practice. And I've heard you talk about SOPs a lot. And so clearly you and your team are focused on how do we help our clients, so those in the nonprofit space for WOW, how do we help them um, perform at their peak? And if that means helping them out with some SOPs, then let's help them out there. And if it means helping them with a rebrand, then let's go that direction. So it's really great to hear how much you and your team bring to the table.
Thank you. In
Yeah.
terms of imagery, if anybody listening to this is still listening to this, I know we've been going on for a while now. If you're going to put images on your website, try to get people looking at the camera. Okay, so scientifically, psychologically, this goes back to like caveman, cave people days. It's a fight or flight, right? If you can look at
Hmm.
somebody in the eyes, you can engage with them more, and you'll be able to tell, okay, is this a safe space, or do I need to like fight or run away, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's baked into our DNA to look at people in the face, and you can create a better, stronger emotional connection with somebody if you've got eyes looking out at the people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. I can't believe it's been an hour. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, David. It's just been super fun to talk with another marketer, particularly one who's so steeped in the nonprofit space. And I know that our conversation today is going to bring a lot of value to those who are able to listen to it. How can people find out more about you and your firm?
Right. So first off, I want to say thank you, Stu, for having me on the show. This has been great. Looking forward to hearing it live and connecting with people in the audience if they want to. You can reach me directly, david@wowdigital.com. You can go online to our website, wowdigital.com. But also, anybody listening, I have a special offer. We've put together an ebook. It's called 3 Simple Words to Increase Your Donations by 20%. You can get it by going to wowdigital.com/ebook.
That's a great offer. I know you also have a podcast. What's the name of your show?
So the show is called the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast, and we talk specifically only about things that are related to digital marketing, web, and technology, that type of thing.
Yeah, that sounds great. If people are looking for another podcast to listen to help fuel their nonprofit growth and learn even more about digital marketing and the digital landscape when it comes to nonprofits, I would recommend you go check out David's podcast. I love having these conversations and being able to just talk through things and throw out ideas and really kind of, go over all of the fun aspects of marketing in the nonprofit world. But I also really want people to take action when they leave our conversation, to have something to do. And so if there was one thing that you would want the audience to do after listening to our show today, what would that be?
First off, I love that you've said that. I'm all about taking action, whether it's small or big. Taking the step forward will only get you closer to where you want to be. So putting that aside, what I would want people to do is go and take a look at your website analytics. If you don't have analytics installed, sign up. I would recommend Google Analytics. It's free. If you need help with it, contact me. We'll install it for you for free, no charge. Just, reach out. But take a look at your analytics. Make sure you're capturing data and see what the content is that people are going to and looking at on your website.
That's great advice. I think that there's so much information to be gleaned from having a better understanding of how people are using one site as well as how they're getting there. So all of that information is definitely available in analytics, and I think that's just sound advice. And I appreciate you taking the time to share that and to chat with me today, David. It's been really wonderful, and I can't wait to hear what's next at WOW.
Thanks so much, Stu. I appreciate the opportunity.
Have a great day.
You as well.
And there you have it, another great episode of Relish This. Thanks again for listening. You can find past episodes of the show at relishthis.org. And remember, if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on purpose marketing, grab your free copy of my book, Mission Uncomfortable: How Nonprofits Can Embrace Purpose-Driven Marketing to Survive and Thrive. Get your copy now at missionuncomfortablebook.com. Thanks again for listening. Come back next week, won't you?